back, WNST and Through the Woods. We certainly have a football game here on Sunday where the season is alive once again after Lamar Jackson and the Ravens beat the Bengals on Sunday. The Oakland Raiders also won in a late game on Sunday out in Arizona, but they bring in the 2-8 and the John Gruden Show. This guy's been reporting on and around the Oakland Raiders for a long time as a sports reporter in the Bay Area and senior writer for the Silver and Black Illustrated and sometimes Associated Press content provider. We welcome Mike Wagaman back onto the program from the Bay Area. You can find him and his fantastic Cocoa Crisp hairdo out on Twitter at @MWagaman on Twitter. Man, different place than where I thought it was going to be talking to you guys here week 11, Thanksgiving week, Raiders coming in. This is beyond repair out there right now, right? Like all eyes are pointed toward Vegas for Gruden, right?
Absolutely, and it's what they've got going on here. There's no short-term fix. They've had a lot of turnover, roster turnover. Much of that, obviously, John Gruden's doing. And then they've also had a pretty bad season in terms of injuries. So that's all kind of had a domino effect on this whole season. But, yeah, I don't see this team really kind of being back into what we would consider a playoff contender for another year or two. I just think they're too far away. They are loaded with 5 first-round draft picks over the next 2 years. So if they can hit on, 3 of those, if they can hit on all 5 of those, then there's a chance that they can get this thing turned around, maybe a little quicker. But definitely a lot of holes on both sides of the ball, and definitely strange. I didn't think we'd be this deep into the season talking about their second win. But, that's the way it's played out for them this year.
Well, I remember being out at the owners' meetings when Jack Del Rio was coaching the team and they moved the team. I was at the Mark Davis press conference, and it was the first time I ever had attended a press conference where they moved the franchise. Me being a Baltimore guy, I'm a little sensitive to all that, right? And seeing that night, I remember Del Rio saying, I got no message to the team. Most of those guys won't make it to Vegas. Well, I mean, God, he didn't even make it back to Oakland, quite frankly, and yet they still have more time to play out there. My heart's broken for the people in the Bay Area who've loved the team and have always loved the team once or twice. I can't imagine if the Colts had moved back here and then left again. I guess the people in St. Louis can speak to that to some degree, but I feel the worst for them, and I know the area, and I've been out there many, many times. I love that old dump, as you know, for baseball or for football, and I know you're subjected to it more often, but it's a very, very weird circumstance that they're still playing football there, in my mind.
Yeah, and I just had this conversation with a friend a couple of weeks ago. I can't think of another fan base in any sport that's been kicked in the gut more than the Bay Area, the Oakland Raider fans. You mentioned St. Louis and how they've lost the football team twice, but they lost 2 different teams. This is the Oakland Raiders are losing the same team twice, and that's never happened as far as I know. And you throw in the fact that John Gruden came back, and he came back in on this white horse, more or less, and everybody welcomed him with loving and open arms, expecting big things from a team that he was adopting that had been, 12-4 only 2 years ago. And to see the mess that it's become this year, it's funny how quickly the fan base has turned a little bit on Gruden. And just, from, like you were saying, this fan base just is, they've getting their hearts ripped out from them. And it could get even worse when you consider the fact that there is no guarantee that the Raiders will play in 2019 in Oakland. The stadium in Las Vegas is projected, and it's on pace to be ready for the 2020 season. But there's a lot of backroom BS, more or less, that's been going on down here in the Bay Area that could force the Raiders to leave town sooner rather than later.
What would the option be? Like, what would they do? I mean, I've never understood why they didn't play in Santa Clara, and I can get to all that, and I do understand now that Mark Davis has made $1 billion and held up Sheldon Adelson and the state of Nevada and all that. So I get that part of it, but what would they do if Oakland says no, thank you? We don't want you back next year.
Well, they preliminarily talked to the city of San Diego. There were some discussions going on there, and they do have a few other options. Most prominently, I think right now, and it's something that Mark Davis has acknowledged he's explored, is the University of Nevada, Reno. for a 1 year kind of interim stay. They do that. There's the Raiders, when they do move, they're looking at the Reno area to hold their training camp as a way to appease the lawmakers in that half of the state that approved the monies and the bonds needed to get the stadium built. This would be another way to do that. Yes, Nevada Reno, I think, has a capacity of maybe 30,000, 25 to 30,000. But when you look at what the San Diego Chargers have done in temporary digs, it's not been great. But it would be just a 1 year kind of stopgap until the stadium in Vegas is completed. Now,
well, that's not unprecedented now, right? And the Bears played in Champaign, and the Panthers played at Clemson. I mean, it's happened. I mean, if that's your look, the Oilers played in Memphis 1 year. I saw them play.
They played in Memphis, yeah.
Yeah,
so
I was at one of those mistakes.
So he does have some options, but I will say that in the last 2 weeks, he's kind of softened his stance, because initially Mark Davis had said that if the city of Oakland and the county of Alameda sue, the moment they file suit, he said, I'm packing my bags and we're out of here. He would finish out this season, obviously, but he would not. At the time, he was not interested. If they had threatened, if they had followed through on their threats to sue, he was not going to listen to staying here beyond that. He's backed off a little bit. He's softened his stance there a little bit, because I do think he realizes that the options aren't great and that he is limited. He does have options, but they are limited. And so it'll definitely be interesting to see how that plays out, because again, that lawsuit, the threat of that lawsuit has not gone away. Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf has been very outspoken in her criticism of the Raiders and their desire to leave and the willingness to leave. So I don't think the final chapter on that that final paragraph on that chapter of things has been written yet. And that's yet another thing that if you're an Oakland Raiders fan here in the Bay Area, you just got to be wondering, when's the next shoe going to drop? What else? What other bad news am I going to get?
He is Mike Wagaman. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at @MWagaman, as well as at the Silver and Black Illustrated. Give me a little bit of your background about falling in love with the Raiders and becoming a guy that covers them and is around the team a bit. I find it fascinating for anyone that is going to parachute them or get on an airplane and fly down to Vegas 4 times a year. I mean, they aren't really. They are the sort of pirate brand, right? Like, you could plop them down in San Diego and people would come 8 times, right? Like, wherever you would plop them down, that they could play next year.
Yeah, I think the brand itself is bigger than the team, if that makes sense. There are Raider fans. Al Davis, rest his soul, was very fond of saying the Raiders are global, and to a large extent they are. The NFL just announced today that they're going to play another game down in Mexico City. They're going to give Mexico City one more shot next year. And in all likelihood, everybody, the way the talk is, and my belief is that the Raiders will be a part of that, because they are one of the more global teams, and they're obviously one of the teams that's willing to give up a home game. That's probably more so critical than anything to go there. But I think the Raiders will be successful from a fan standpoint, no matter where they go. The fact that they're going to Las Vegas, that's going to cause some anxiety, I think, in terms of ticket sales and things like that. But you will have a chunk of the Bay Area fans, because Vegas is not a huge drive away. They will go there. You're going to have a big chunk of their Southern California fan base, which has remained strong ever since they moved back to Northern California. They will follow that team there. And then, you will slowly but surely cultivate a fan base out there in Las Vegas, provided you win. And we see what the Las Vegas Knights have done, in a very short period of time. They win the championship their first year, and they've done well from a fan base standpoint. And then you will get the casinos that will buy up the luxury suites and offer them to high rollers, and you'll get the casual international fans that'll be in town and say, hey, let's catch a game. So,
I saw what the hockey team did there, right? I mean, I was out there for the Stanley Cup Finals, and, everywhere you look now, they've got their stuff, and the Golden Misfits and all that stuff that they've branded around. Vegas should be the final resting destination for the Raiders, I guess. I mean, I'm not against the move. I'm not against any of that. I just think it's sort of weird that they're still playing there. And I really think it's weird that they brought Gruden in to be the guy to fix the brand and heal things and all that. And instead, he sort of has burned it to the ground. And time will tell whether it can be built back up. I mean, he certainly has a large level of confidence, but I don't know that the street credibility and the faith is still there in him. It's been 2 decades since he won a championship.
Right, and you look at his draft history when he was in Tampa Bay, because it's easier to coach when you've got good players. And when John Gruden, it was in his first tour of duty with the Raiders, he had the players and he was successful because Al Davis was bringing those players in. People can say that Al was losing his touch or whatever towards the end, but Al had brought and built a pretty good team for John to coach. And John, take nothing away from him. He did a great job coaching those teams. But when you look at what he did when he more or less was in the de facto GM head coach position like he is now in Oakland, down there in Tampa Bay, he did not have a lot of success. He only drafted 2 defensive players, and only one of them really had sustained success, and that was Aqib Talib, who's still in the league, obviously, and playing well with the Rams when he gets back off IR, that is. But John's history has not been good in terms of the draft. It's mediocre at best, and, you got a guy armed with 5 draft picks, and if what we're expecting to happen actually happens, and Reggie McKenzie is either shown the door or walks out the door himself, John will have, unfettered access to control of the draft, and therein lies the whole Raiders' future these next 2 years. You've got 5 first-round draft picks. You mortgaged away your best players in Khalil Mack, your best wide receiver in Amari Cooper. You got rid of those guys, and you got 5 first-round draft picks for it. Kudos to you. Now, what are you going to do with it? If they fail on those 5 draft picks, then I don't see Gruden making it through the entire 10-year contract. I don't see him wanting to be there the entire 10-year of that contract. And if they fail on those first-round picks, it could be a long, long time before this team's back to respectability because, Reggie McKenzie, we can argue his draft picks back and forth, but he's done a great job getting this team back from salary cap hell. It took him 3 years to get them out of that, and he did a phenomenal job doing that. If he leaves and John Gruden does not have success in that de facto GM role, who are they going to get to come in here and either work alongside Gruden? Would Gruden ever accede any of that power? Would somebody be willing to work alongside John Gruden in a limited GM capacity role? So there's all kinds of, unknowns as this franchise kind of lurches forward in the waters. And, it's just shocking to me that when we look back, 2 years ago, this was a playoff team, a 12-4 team that many, including myself, thought, hey, in 2017, this team could be the one to, maybe push Tom Brady and New England off that pedestal in the AFC, and it's been anything but that. It's gone exactly in the opposite direction.
Mike Wagaman is here. He is Silver and Black Illustrated, and of course the Raiders coming in on the backside of the pumpkin pie and the turkey and on the cranberry and all the good stuff we're going to have this week. We got back into the race here, man. We're alive and well, and one of the reasons we're alive and well is I start to do the math and say, well, Oakland's coming in. That's just a win, right? I don't know. I mean, they played Arizona tough. They won a game that they easily could have lost. They're not a very good team, I think, by anyone's admission. But what are we going to see here on Sunday, Mike, in regard to football players that are John Gruden's kind of football players? I mean, he's put this thing together. I'm assuming what he's sending out there to post on Sunday has his name on it. There've got to be a handful of these guys that are keepers to some degree, right?
Well, I think that's what they're trying to find out, really. I think that's what this kind of situation has evolved into, rather than trying to contend in the division or trying to contend for a playoff spot. It's obviously, they're out of it. They're 2-8. They're not going anywhere in the postseason. So they've got 6 games left. They need to find out who can play on this roster going forward, who wants to play. It was funny because over the last 2.5 weeks, the talk has really been around here in some of the media, some of the national media too, but mostly amongst the fans has been about this team tanking. And, I disagree with that philosophy altogether, and you saw that yesterday. By winning, they dropped from the number 1 to the number 3 spot. But more importantly, there's not a player in any sport, baseball, basketball, football, hockey, a player who could ever afford to tank. They can't. Their jobs depend on it. And that's what I think the message to these players on this Raiders roster has to be over these last 6-week games is, can you prove that you belong not either on this roster or on someone, one of the other 31 teams? And the Raiders need to find this out because, obviously they've overhauled their roster. They got many, many holes to fill. So they need to see just exactly how many holes they're going to head into the offseason needing to patch, be it through free agency or the draft.
He is Mike Wagaman. He is M. Wagaman out on Twitter and at the Associated Press in the Silver and Black Illustrated. Where's Carr in all this, right? I mean, every time Khalil Mack makes a tackle on national TV, we all make fun of Gruden, but Carr's the guy that's sort of left behind. And, I never looked at him and thought, like, John Gruden's going to look at him and see stars and think he has the ideal guy and his next Tom Brady. So I don't know that I ever felt like they were married. I am shocked that Gruden sort of overhauled this thing from the beginning in that way. Because I don't know that it was portrayed as such. And certainly for Carr and what happened on the sidelines over the weekend, it looks like he, along with Joe Flacco and some other guys, are going to be looking for gigs soon, right?
I'm not so sure. I just don't think, this is just my opinion. I haven't sat down with John and picked his ear exactly how he feels about Derek Carr. Every time he talks very glowingly, yet he's been very honest in some of his criticisms of Derek. And, in terms of what happened yesterday on the sideline, I really don't make a big deal out of that because John Gruden used to go at it with Rich Gannon all the time. John Gruden is very fiery, and he's going to let you know how he feels. Now, I think maybe what separated yesterday from previous incidents was the fact that after the cameras left the situation, Gruden continued and kind of went after Carr a little bit to where Lee Smith, their backup tight end, had to kind of step in and pull the two apart. Again, I don't think that particular incident really defines the relationship between the two. You saw them laughing and hugging later after Carr led them to that game-winning field goal. So, from the overall standpoint, I think it's very difficult to really gauge how Derek Carr and John Gruden work together based on this season. The Raiders' offensive line has been a mess. They've been starting 2 rookie offensive tackles for the better part of the year. Definitely Colton Miller, their first-round draft pick, has been starting all year at left tackle. So he's been under a lot of pressure all year. He's been sacked more than he's ever been in his career. He's dealing with a very, very depleted receiving core that lost Brandon LaFell to an Achilles injury, probably for the remainder of the year. It's just what Carr has had to work with around him has been minimal. Now, you take all that away, it doesn't matter. There are quarterbacks around the league that have been in the same situation and they produce. And Derek Carr has not produced as well as I think he could have been. And I think he will even admit to that. He's not taking the deep shots downfield. He's become much more, over the last 2.5 seasons, very conservative. Remember, when he came out of the league, he was drawing a lot of comparisons to Brett Favre, the old gunslinger type of quarterbacks who were not afraid to throw it into double and triple coverage in the tight windows. And, they would turn the ball over, but hey, they were willing to risk it for the big play. You don't see that from Derek Carr. Ever since he broke his leg against Indianapolis late in the 2016 season, and then in week 3 last year, he suffered a broken bone in his back against Washington, things have not been the same for him. He's much more quick to release the ball. He's, again, this year it's been tough because of the lack of protection he's had around him, but he doesn't seem to me to be the same confident guy. He talks confidently, but it's a different Derek Carr on the field than I'm used to seeing, for the first 3 years of his career. Now, it was, to his credit, I thought that pass that he threw in Sunday's win over Arizona to set up the game-winning field goal to Marcel Aitman was probably one of the top 5 passes he's thrown all year. And there wasn't anything fancy about it. He just hit the receiver. He put the ball where only the receiver could get it, hit him on the fly, on the run, It wasn't like the receiver had to turn and get the ball, or the ball wasn't underthrown like so many of Carr's passes have been this year. So I think that was a good sign. And, hey, he's completing passes at, ridiculous rates, upwards of 70%, I believe. So, he's doing some good things, but I just think, I think that there will have to be at least another year or two of evaluation between Gruden and Carr, and I firmly don't believe that Derek Carr is going anywhere. I don't think, barring there's a couple guys maybe coming out in the draft you might want to take a shot on, but unless you're sure of getting someone that's going to be better than him right now, there's no need to push the panic button this year or this off season and grab a quarterback. You can afford to roll with Derek Carr another year or two, and if you decide he's not your guy, then you make a move, next year or the year beyond that. I just think that the Raiders have so many other holes to fill. It would really, I think, be a setback for this franchise to have to start over at quarterback as well.
Well, and given a lot of money, which we learned here, you have a $25 million quarterback. It's different than having a $1 million quarterback, and you can't compare the outputs, right? I mean, that it really is about what it does to the rest of your roster.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's funny because it's kind of the same thing with how I look at John Gruden. A member of their PR staff was upset and said that, he felt like things had turned personal against Gruden in the media out here, and I tried to explain to him, if John Gruden had come in like a first-year head coach, whether he's a college guy promoted or a coordinator promoted, and there wasn't not a lot known about him, and it was his first year, and he was still having the same kind of season, yeah, he'd be getting criticized, but it definitely wouldn't be like what John Gruden's facing this year. John Gruden came in with a 10-year, $100 million contract. He was the savior. And it was a notion that was fostered by the team, by the PR staff, by the fans, by the media, by Gruden himself. So
it was a little different than the Orioles press conference on Monday after 115 losses saying it's scorched earth, we're going to build it back up. I mean, he inherited something that people legitimately harbored, like we've got a great defensive player, we've got a quarterback we can live with, we've got some draft picks we can work with here. We're not going to go back to the days of 3-13, but that's where they are.
And that's where they are. And so I think that John Gruden has to get judged differently, just like Derek Carr. Like you mentioned, you get that $125 million contract or whatever it is, you're going to be looked at a lot differently. Now, sir, if I got a $150,000 raise, you're going to look at me differently and have bigger expectations from me. Same thing goes for you. I would expect you to be driving around in a much nicer car. If you had a bigger payday than we do now, but I mean that's just the way the sporting world is, and so it's I got to tell you, covering a winning team is always nice, but give me a team that loses and has all these subplots to them, and it's like daytime soap operas out here. I love it.
Mike Wagaman is out on the beat in the Bay Area for all things Raiders. Raiders come in here, take on the Ravens on Sunday. Mike, thanks for always being a great guest. We'll send everybody out to the Silver and Black Illustrated as well as your AP work, which shows up on our timeline at WNST.net as our AP partner. M. Wagaman, the way to follow him in a great Cocoa Crisp. They don't make them like that anymore, do they? The hairstyle,
no,
the Oscar
don't.
Gamble. They don't. We lost Oscar Gamble recently too, so that kind of sucks too. Hey,
That's a great reference, though. I got to give you credit for that. That's a great Afro reference.
Well, I mean, you could go with Kaepernick right now, but you're familiar with that in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah, but Kaepernick never put a baseball cap on just rested it on his afro,
right?
Like Oscar did.
Oscar did.
That was tremendous as a kid. I used to love that.
We lost Oscar recently, and I gave him a moment of silence on my air because everyone should have owned an Oscar Gamble baseball card before it was all over.
I agree.
Mike, be well. We'll see you out there soon, okay?
Sounds good, Nestor. Take care, my friend.
Keep the tequila out there in the Bay Area in San Francisco at my buddy Tommy's Mexican restaurant on Geary out in the Richmond district. I mean, I missed the Raiders' trip last year, quite frankly, with a broken heart over my cat. But I missed that. I still need to get back out there, and they might really be done. They might really be playing in, like, Reno before it's all over with. Well, we think we got a mess around here. They got a real mess in Oakland, and the Raiders hopefully will continue to be the hot mess they are this weekend. You can find me out on the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships directly to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's always $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. Reminder to everybody out there, Dennis Colossus is working Tuesday this week, but the Orioles are in overtime right now looking for a manager. When they hire the manager, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. I am Nestor. We are after it all week, through the holiday, Black Friday, turkey, cranberry, pumpkin pie, mincemeat pie, whatever your choice. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.